I'm Karina Fonseca Ferreira, and I'm a disaster risk management specialist at the World Bank and COTAS team leader for the World Bank Global Program for Safer Schools. Welcome to Designing Schools of the Future to build education resilience post-COVID-19. Kindly note that the event will be recorded. COVID-19 has had unprecedented negative impacts on global education. This spring, schools shut down in 180 countries, cutting off learning opportunities to 1.5 billion students. Efforts to reopen schools safely have exposed the limitations of our school infrastructure, and the crisis has transformed how students learn. While the scale of this crisis makes it feel new, learning loss caused by disasters is all too familiar. There are countless examples from around the world, like this one from the 2010 Haiti earthquake, all of which disproportionately impact the poorest and most vulnerable, especially girls. On top of this, the level of risk and uncertainty is only mounting. Climate change increases the risk posed by hurricanes, flooding, heat, and drought. Population growth and migration complicate education planning, resulting in overcrowding in some schools and inefficient use or closure of others, and forcing many children to travel long distances to and from school. Meanwhile, the way children learn and the jobs they need to be prepared for have changed drastically in the last several decades. Yet, most students are learning 21st century skills in classrooms conceived in the 19th century. And many schools are literally falling apart. Leaking roofs, mold, toppling walls, no running water, unspeakable sanitary conditions, and no budget for maintenance and repair. Why are we in this situation? We all care about children, their health, well-being, and development. We all know that education is the key to unlocking economic growth. The return on investment is obvious. More importantly, what are we doing about it? The World Bank is developing technical tools to address the problem at scale, to help governments create long-term school infrastructure investment plans with the limited funds they have. We are looking not only at making schools safe and functional after natural disasters, but also at the impact of learning environments on the quality of education and ways to cost-effectively achieve green designs. To make progress, there are two questions we think are important to answer. How to build in flexibility and adaptation so schools can be effective for decades to come, even as needs change over time or perhaps temporarily in times of crisis. And how to foster positive mechanisms for families and communities to use and interact with schools. Today, we will hear about how the city of Cali is addressing these challenges and transforming communities into schools and schools into communities. We will learn from a creative school architect who is working to improve education through design. And we will also learn from an education colleague on the power of school infrastructure to transform children's education. We will start with Vivian. the former Chief Resilience Officer of Cali in Colombia, on her work over the past 5 years to enhance the safety and learning environments of school infrastructure in Cali. Over to you, Vivian.
Thank you, Karina, and thank you, everybody. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, depending on where you're connecting from. It's really a privilege to be here and to be able to share some of the insights that we gained in Cali, Colombia, because I think you will find some of the insights useful in the work that you're doing. To begin with, I'll give you some context about the city. Cali is the third largest city in Colombia. It has a population of about 2.2 to 2.4 million inhabitants, and it's a very diverse city. It's a city that has 23% of its population are Afro-Colombians or Afro-descendants, and it's also a city where that has been formed through migration patterns from the internally displaced populations of Colombia during the war that we've had. So the city is very diverse and it's changing dynamically year after year. In terms of its educational infrastructure, we have 92 public schools located in 342 school sites, and we have 16 early childhood development centers. Now, this infrastructure is mostly focused in the urban perimeter of the city that you can see here highlighted in dark black. The colors, the redder the color of that you see, that means that there is more educational infrastructure concentrated in that area. And as you can see, most of it is in the center of the urban perimeter, whereas this is the rural area of Cali. There is less infrastructure, but it's scattered all over the city. However, this has become a problem lately because, as you can see in the second map, the population of children or the school age children in the city have been moving to different districts within the city. And as we can see, that population is now concentrated in the perimeters, around the districts that I'm pointing out here. And the schools are located in another area. So this disconnect between the distribution of infrastructure and school age children is obviously a problem. Added to that, we have high rates of school desertion, and we have very dated classroom practices. And of course, low performance and standardized testing, which made the government realize that it was necessary to have an intervention. And as Karina was just mentioning, we faced a similar problem to most countries in the world. We had very old, inadequate infrastructure that hasn't been maintained, that hasn't been upkept over the years, infrastructure that wasn't seismic resistant, which is a big deal for Cali, and I'll tell you later why. Infrastructure that didn't have adequate lighting or ventilation. Cali is a very warm city. It has a wonderful, sunny 365 year calendar practically, but this requires a lot of ventilation. And of course, it just had outdated infrastructure, as you can see, which was not helping with these desertion rates. As a result, the city set this goal to really try to strengthen the relevance and quality of education and at the same time generate resilient educational infrastructure that would also provide adequate learning environments. And there was a political decision made to make the largest investment in the history of the city in the educational sector and to create a program that would focus on incorporated resilience into the school curriculum and the infrastructure. Now, unfortunately, because of time issues, I cannot share with you the work that we did in terms of incorporating resilience into the school curriculum, but you should contact me and you should let me tell you about it because we did some great work. What I will tell you is what we did in terms of infrastructure. Um, and now I'm sure everybody's hoping that I will tell you that we started with a baseline study and an analysis and diagnosis, and that's how we prioritize investments. But that's not the reality of what happened. In fact, we couldn't think at that moment in a systemic way. We just chose a couple of interventions based on the data that we had available, and we started working. But about a year into the program, we realized that somehow, no matter all the resources that we were putting into this program, we weren't really solving long-term the educational infrastructure issue. And that's when we came across GFDRR and the Global Program for Safer Schools. And they showed us that something existed, that there was a way of thinking systemically about our school portfolio that would help us resolve the issues that we were facing. In fact, we realized that there was this roadmap, the roadmap for safer and resilient schools that would teach us, that would give us this guidance on a step-by-step basis of how to transform the situation that we were facing to a projected or desirable situation. So on that, we really are thankful to GFDRR and the Global Program for Safer Schools. Also, I believe Cali was the first city that implemented this methodology. It was really a good opportunity for us. Now, what we did is basically, as you can see here, apply these different steps. You begin with this diagnosis, which it basically asks you to get this you establish your basic school infrastructure baseline and cross-reference it with school infrastructure policy. And so something very interesting happened for us. We realized that we learned a lot of things about the infrastructure that we had. We realized that we had 1,550 school buildings. Each of these buildings were built in different time periods and had different conditions and characteristics. And we learned the state of each one of those buildings. When we cross-referenced it with the construction guidelines in the country for educational facilities and also seismic resistance norms and fire department regulations, we came to the conclusion that only 15% of school buildings conformed to these guidelines, which was a shock for us, really. But once we analyzed the year of construction, we could start to see why this was the case, because most of the guidelines in the country came from 2010 onwards. And most of our school portfolio, as you can see here, was built way prior to that. In fact, more than 50% was built prior to 1984. So schools, as Karina was mentioning, were dated. They were no longer suited for the needs that we had now. Now, we also proceeded in this analysis stage to look at factors that we had never considered before. The construction environment was such an important part of the work that we were doing. So we did an analysis of the last 8 years of projects in terms of maintenance, of construction, of reinforcement, and we learned valuable information from that. We learned what were the roadblocks, where we were usually finding problems, what construction costs we hadn't been taking into account, and yet they were always being recurrent. We also realized how we were not taking into consideration licensing and design and supervision costs, and that's why we were always off budget, or that was why we had delays. And for the first time in the city, we were able to put all this data together and establish references values for each type of activity per square meter, which allowed us to begin realizing what would be the cost of interventions depending on what type of interventions they were. And most importantly, we also did something that seems so obvious and yet we had never done before, which was look at the risk and resilience assessment of our schools. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Cali is a city that is located in the Pacific Ring of Fire. This is the most seismically active zone in the world. So it's very vulnerable in this sense. It is also a city that has 7 wonderful rivers, but these rivers flood. And so the city is also prone to floods caused both by rainfall and by the rivers. And of course, the city is also prone to landslides. So we realized that schools actually had certain considerable risks, and we had to take this into account when we were doing our interventions. Now, once we had all that information, we started cross-referencing the data. And we realized that we had to do this intervention strategy, an investment plan, and then an implementation strategy. Now, the intervention strategy had to take into consideration both technical considerations and political ones, because the reality is that, we are a city that lives in the day-to-day realities of life, and we couldn't only propose a plan and intervention strategy that considered technical considerations, because obviously it was going to be rejected by our decision makers. So we started calculating both factors, but always making sure that the technical considerations were our primary focus. We also had clear financial scenarios because we had done a financial analysis. So we knew approximately how much money the city could spend in the transformation of its school infrastructure, not in a 4-year period, not in an 8-year period, but in a 12-year period, so that we could think short, medium, and long term and have a strategy that would be implemented over time. And finally, we started thinking on a large scale instead of a case-to-case basis. And that had always been our problem. In Cali, we were always thinking about schools one a piece. But now we were thinking about our entire school portfolio. So we knew that we were going to be able to do systemic changes. Now, we identified 3 types of constructions, basically, that we were going to have to do, or interventions. One was we were going to have to build new schools because we had children in places where there were no schools available. So we were going to have to construct new schools. We were also going to have to reconstruct some schools. That means use existing sites that we had, but have to build them anew because they were just too old or too dated. And of course, there were some schools that we were going to be able to reinforce and place contingency measures, because now, given that we knew exactly the state of each building, we could target our interventions and therefore be much more efficient. So in this final stage, we did precisely the 2 columns that I'm showing at the right hand of your screen represented different scenarios that we did. In the first scenario, when we were still not thinking in terms of innovation in our construction policies or the way that we constructed. We were just thinking about doing the same type of schools that we always did. We found that it was going to take us about $834 million over a 12-year period to be able to do all the work that we had to do to update the school portfolio. And we were off budget. Basically, we knew that the financial analysis showed that we had 700 million that we could really count on based on how historically the municipality had invested. So we were really worried about how we were going to find a solution. And then we realized that we could play with the floors, with the number of floors that schools had, and we could play with different ways of building school sites. And in one of those changes, we could see how the budget changed dramatically to $691 million over this 12-year period. So this is just an example of how our implementation strategy could change because we had all this information and data. Now, I'm not going to tell you that we built the most resilient or innovative schools in the world, especially given other presentations that are upcoming following me. But I will tell you that we did think about schools in a different way. And we did incorporate aspects in terms of design that had never been thought about before. Thinking about how to save energy, how to use our waste resources more efficiently, how to take advantages of the climate of the city. And the most important thing was that we changed in terms of thinking of the long term of this school infrastructure plan. We were no longer thinking about what we could do in this 4-year period of government, but we did this for the first time. We had a plan for the short, medium, and long term. And we had systemic thinking about school infrastructure. No more case-to-case basis, no more expensive school expenditure. And finally, we incorporated resilience. We really learned through this project how to incorporate resilience both into the educational practices and the school infrastructure. And this would be very, very important because just as we were celebrating, we were handing over all this infrastructure to the different communities in March 2020, you all know what happened. We were hit by the same wave or the same struggle that everybody was afflicted by. But very interestingly, because we had worked on our educational curriculum, it was that resilience practice in school curricula that actually saved us and allowed for the continuation of educational practices in Cali. So as I said, this program that we had both the infrastructure and the softer or curricular side of resilience incorporated. And it was really valuable because it really helped us improve our educational system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vivian. It was really great presentation and a lot of insights. Beautiful buildings, by the way. I guess we are continuing to deliver our session. I will introduce myself. My name is Tigran Schmiss. I'm education specialist in the World Bank, and I'm dealing with projects related to school infrastructure and mainly learning environments that are conducive to learning. And I will do a very quick presentation before I pass over to our other colleague, Takaharu, but I'll do a very quick presentation of what we do in the bank in terms of the resilient recovery and school infrastructure in schools of the future. So the first one, I wanted to show you example that we did in one of little Russian cities on the north. And basically, it's very different from Cali, of course, because there's winter time and temperatures go below 0 Celsius degrees, so minus 30, minus 40 Celsius degree. And this is where school infrastructure also needed around the year, and children should feel themselves very well during the learning and development. And this is the design of the kindergarten that we started to help actually the region to design, and the request was to make an efficient building in terms of energy efficiency and cost efficiency, with some innovative solutions related to spaces and accessibility of the building. And this is one of the examples where we suggested a central space design for the building, where basically idea was to make the space as maximum available to children as possible. And this is what we achieved. Basically, this is the layout. You will be able to see this presentation later. The approach was to exactly to move from passive technology or passive learning to the active learning environment. And we try to maximize the connection between the spaces and connection between children, based on the development theory, which says basically the more interactions children have, the better they develop. And technically, it means that for us, it meant that we increase the active space for children, we decrease the footprint of the building, and we apply technologies that are now helping to save electricity, heating, and so on. And basically, on the life cycle of the project, we calculated the savings that this building could produce, which turned out to be very significant, even given that the region is basically mines the gas, natural gas, and oil. But even there, with low prices for gas and oil, it really saves a lot of funds. Further down, we also do these other layers of work related to school infrastructure and learning environments, which is basically looking at why we should do something differently and why we should think of schools that are modern and advanced. And this is one of the slides that I wanted to show you, the theory of change, basically, or theory of research of learning environments. So link down below will lead you to the paper that we produced on this topics, and it actually shows you where you could look at when you think of designing schools, and what knowledge is already existing as we speak today, related to the school design, and what is good for school design and what is not that good for school design. And later on, given that we produced this analytical piece, we also learned that we don't know a lot in terms of how school learning spaces are really related to the children learning. This is the one of the publications that we recently published, and we used intensively. We used the research of UK, from the UK, in Peter Barrett, actually our co-author on this book, where he and his team in UK schools, they try to understand what affects student learning outcomes in schools, and they show that physical characteristic and non-physical characteristic actually affect student learning outcomes. But what they didn't do is actually they didn't look at how different spaces were affecting learning outcomes. And we tried to do this based on team's results. I would encourage you to look at this publication, and what we showed actually is basically, or noticed, is basically the correlation between the diversity of teaching and learning methods and student outcomes. So basically, kids that were experienced diverse teaching and learning experiences were learning better than those who didn't, who used simple individual or classroom type of work. And one of these methods actually related to team teaching. Team teaching is obviously impossible without different types of learning spaces. Well, many of them would be much better implemented in the spaces that are diverse. And this is what we basically show in our projects, and what we speak in our projects when we suggest different designs. Is basically, we're talking about changing spaces, we're talking about teaching and learning and teacher preparation, and some kind of reforms of the assessment. What happens now is basically we are seeing that the COVID-19 crisis exacerbates all these issues related to the traditional teaching and learning. It pushes us to even more diverse teaching and training, which includes online learning and shifts and smaller groups. So that is very interesting in context of the COVID. And with that, I don't have a lot of time, so I want to introduce my our next presenter. It's Takaharu Tezuka. Takaharu is a very known person in school infrastructure field, and he does a lot of projects across the world, and one of the famous circular kindergartens in Japan. So Takaharu, please, the floor is yours. I will stop sharing here.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Please proceed.
Okay. Hello, everybody. And as I have introduced, I'm actually designing donuts. Actually, I have done as a merchandise, but I have only 15 minutes. And also, I have been working on, I have been working on elementary school and junior high schools and different kind of classrooms. But since we have only 15 minutes, just I stick to just these donuts. So you have to give me another chance to talk about other classrooms. So about this school, this is where my idea is coming from. My kids, yellow and green, they used to love making circles. But this is, kind of memory written into their cerebral cortex before they're born. Just they keep making circles. So we made a building just like this, so they can keep making circles. But when we did this for this school building, there are a few trees on the way. But if you cut the root, the tree dies. So we kept the building, but yet we kept the root too. So building is just flying over the root of these trees. Okay, so trees are popping through the classroom. And when we designed this school, owner, Mr. Kato, told me, I don't want handrail for this rooftop. It's far from the problem of the safety, no? He was really against it. So I said, well, it's impossible. It's a safety requirement. You have to have a handrail. And if you get sued, you are going to be jailed. But he told me, how about having a net sticking out from the edge of the roof so that you can catch the children falling off? Well, it's impossible. Then somehow he convinced me. So I made many drawings. So I went to City Hall. And I explained to government officials, oh, we don't have a handrail. But we have net to catch the children falling off. Should be okay. They said, they're looking at us. They said, are you insane? So we came back. So I told him, they said, I'm crazy. And then he said, oh, no, I'm serious. Go back. Actually, he made a phone call. And we realized this time they are listening to us and realized, they really listen to principal. And most of them are from this kindergarten. Just imagine, this kindergarten has been there over 70 years, okay? But the principal has no election. Even president of a country has to go through election 4 years. He has dictatorship, so he's very strong. And all the kids in his kindergarten are told, you have to listen to principal. And they are grown up. And now they are working for government. And the principal saying, no, I don't want the handrail. So they're listening. And somehow we could keep the idea around the tree. And you get more kids. Kids, more, and more. Sometimes over 40. And you see this boy really loves the tree, so he's eating the tree. He kept saying, I want only net on the edge. I said, it's impossible. They are climbing over. But then at the end, he said, oh, it's nice. Monkeys in zoo. Feeding time. So now you can see building like this. But we were not exactly following our building standard for the kindergarten in Japan. First of all, ceiling height was supposed to be over 3 meters. But the principal said, oh, no, kids are small. Why do you need 3 meters? And there is no boundary between classroom. Very, very free space. It's very flexible space. And this is Montessori education. We don't need any wall between classrooms. And then we want to see the kids on top of the roof. So the roof should be as low as possible. Wow. And so in the local government was really upsetting, but he told us, no, they are not paying, I'm paying. So, you have to listen to me. I think it's a good idea. And as I told, they can't complain to your principal. So they are complaining to us. Always we are having trouble, even from the local authority in our pedagogical field. But everything gets changed one day. CLE in OECD try to find out the best school building in the world. And then there are more than 166 representatives from United Nations. And one day you got a call from Ministry of Education. Something wonderful happened. The school you designed became the best of the best in the world, including university, high school, everything. And interesting about Japanese government is that they don't listen to Japanese, they don't listen to Chinese, they don't listen to Korean, but they listen to European, they listen to American. Suddenly, we got the Mr. Prize. Wow, wonderful. And then we went to Paris, and there's many delegates came along with us. And we had a very nice dinner. And then we came back, and we realized my partner, my wife Yui, became the one to set up a new standard for the kindergarten. Now just we as a government, we can do whatever we want. That is nice. This is how it builds things. This is a gargoyle, and you can't have a downpipe because there are so many leaves falling onto the roof. As you can see, as you could see, there are many trees on top popping through the roof. This is interesting slide. It is lake washing place. This is normal water tap. This flexible one so that you can spray water to friends, shower. By the way, this boy is not washing his boots. He's putting water into the boots. Now, this is very important slide. As you can see, most of the time, the room is very, very open. And then there used to be many visitors from around the world. And we used to have more than 1,000 visitors every month from outside of Japan. One day, we got the educational specialist, a German professor, came to this kindergarten. He asked a question to principal. Oh, you know, when it's rainy and a windy day, kids might get wet. What would you do? And the principal, Mr. Kato, said, oh, in Japan, when they get wet, they change. Oh, but even they get changed, they get wet. In Japan, usually kids are waterproofed. So they were showing how kids are playing around. Yes, they're waterproofed. And there's one more slide I want to say, because it's a movie. It's a bit noisy. Can you hear? This is not Japan, this is Indonesia. It's a bit scientific thing, you know? And you can hear the background noise. The beep is coming from jungle. But when we were listening to ritual, we were not aware of the existence of this background noise. But when we came back to Japan, we realized there's a huge noise. And then scientists explained to me, you know, your body is doing same all the time because your body is making huge noise, but you are canceling the noise. That's the reason why you can talk to other people. But once you dive under the water, you can hear body noise. Your body is disconnected. Because you are out from jungle, you can hear the background noise. But when you were in jungle, it can cancel noise because you are the kind of grown-up jungle. But our point is that you know, we were not designed to be quiet, clean environment. Also, temperature changing. That is natural situation. So I wrote about this for United Nations. And also, this is very interesting research from doctor. You know, when you put newborn baby in quiet special room, they start having a mental disorder. So it's very important to have background noise. And also, you know, I wrote something about bacterial balance and how, you know, important to be bacterial balance instead of being in very clean room. But I don't have time to talk about this so much. So this is how they divide classrooms. They were supposed to work with teacher, but they are quite lazy. They don't work. They don't work. They don't work. They don't work. Okay, this is wash basin, so they can communicate each other. Christmas time. Tree, a monkey trying to fish another monkey. And each classroom got the skylight. So there are more than 18 skylights. This is where Santa Claus comes down. By the way, it's designed for Japanese Santa Claus only. It's too small for European. You know, lighting, very, very basic. But there are more than 200 strings. So it can lit up only where you want. My point is, instead of just using latest technology, we are trying to teach them the consciousness of the energy. So now this is a movement, a boy between 10 past 9 to 30 past 9. Within 20 minutes, he made so much. You should know this is not small building. You can put 4,000 people on top of the roof. But amazingly, he made 6,000 meters in the morning, 6 kilometers. But a surprise is not yet to come. The average of the movement of kids is about 4,000 meters, which is about 5 times more than normal kindergarten. Now you can show you the collection of some TV programs. You can see the movement of the kids. The point is they were not told what they should do. Sometimes there are music classroom and mathematics room, mathematics class, and you can see that they are running, but they are not told to run. I know that in some expensive kindergarten, they're running music so that they can run smoothly, but on the top of the roof, they're running to a different way. Sometimes they bump each other, they don't die. This is how they were supposed to be. It's complete. This is a completely spontaneous movement. And the principal tell us, no, don't be kind to them. Sometimes inconvenience is good for them. We don't need a beautiful dollhouse. And this day we let them climb the tree. But when they want to climb the tree, you don't need to worry about, because when they climb spontaneously, they're ready. When they don't want to climb up, they're not ready. They know what they want to learn. Now I'm going to show you a very short video. It's my son, 24 months, just his birthday. This is how I taught him how to swim. Next day, swimming like this. And 8 years later, he could dive 7 to 8 meters when he was 10 years old. He never got drowned. So the crisis we are talking about, I was talking about, is different from the previous presenters. Spoil is the biggest problem. That brings danger for them. If they don't learn how to fall down when they were small, they never will. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can stop sharing screen.
Thank you very much, Takaharu, for such nice presentation. My name is Johnson Teixeira. I'm a senior education specialist with Old Bank. I think this is the 4th or 5th time that I listen to you, and I always learn something new from you, and I really appreciate your presentation, your talks. So thank you very much, Takaharu, again.
Thank you.
I'll be very brief. I'm just going to try to connect some dots from what was delivered today. And I'd start by saying that I do believe that intuitively, most of us who are visually gathered today for this event, I'd say we probably agree that the design of the spaces where we live or work makes a difference on how we feel and in turn how we perform the activities in which we are engaged. And in the challenging times of the COVID, I would say that's not only the design of space that matters. The arrangements, I would say, for home-based work and remote learning, they call for a truly holistic approach to better understand what factors make a work or a learning space effective and efficient as well. The speakers provided to us very good food for thought to better understand what I just said. Vivian explained how the municipality of Cali has used a systemic approach for investing, for making decisions on investments in education infrastructure. And she explained how those interventions are enhancing the safety of schools in Cali. My dear colleague Tigran, shared the results of very relevant research on the impacts of school infrastructure and learning outcomes in Russia. And then Takaharu delighted us with his thoughts on how good design can influence behavior and benefit education. And as I said, very good to hear from me about the monkeys and the transformation of education in that preschool. My key takeaways from the speakers' talks are the following. I think that we all agree there is about time to think about school infrastructure that is indeed conducive to learning, but this should be done considering the fundamental needs to care at the same time for disaster risk management in places like Cali, Colombia. If you want to think about countries, I'd say countries like Chile, Romania, Tajikistan. It's also important to consider the need to adopt playful approach to learning, as in the case of the kindergarten in Fuji, Japan. In other contexts, what we politicians, decision makers are looking at is to have a minimum adequate sanitary conditions in schools, which is fundamental in the countries that I'm working in right now for the World Bank, in Africa, like Liberia, Sierra Leone, Mali. I'm trying to say that it's all about learning, but not only learning. I also think about challenges on how to address those challenges together and doing so at scale and within budget. So those are questions maybe that we could discuss a little bit today in the next 5 minutes. But I can quickly try to answer these questions through the lens of holism and pragmatism, I would say. I would say that if you think about the local level teachers and school principals and at the wider, more broad level policymakers, they can focus, they should focus on the very key aspects of education infrastructure that could maximize learning. And I would say many of those elements don't cost too much, don't cost a lot of money. Like the rearrangement of the layout of classrooms. And those simple things can be done easily and immediately as we speak. And of course, there are those elements of education infrastructure that do cost money. And for those, we should use evidence to inform the optimal utilization of resources that we all know that are scarce. So those are my thoughts. I will stop here, and I hope my thoughts make some sense to you. Thank you very much, and over to you, Tigran.
Thank you very much, Janssen, and it's very good thoughts. They are all sinking in, and we have actually limited time for this session. Very limited, considering the importance of the topic. But I would just pass over to Zuka and to Vivian. The question that we were thinking of is, and basically this is a question about the COVID-19, because this is current situation, current crisis, and we would be interested to hear from you very briefly. Tell us one or two things that changed your architectural mind with this COVID crisis. What happened, or nothing changed, basically. Just let us know, please. Takaharu, please.
Okay, it's me. Okay, actually, this station didn't change our design at all. So far, so our architecture is quite open. So, it's good for this COVID situation. And also, I should tell you the situation in Japan. Somehow, our population is quite immune to COVID. So, very, very small percentage of people. Small percentage of people died. Only a few thousand died. Compared to the situation we have, considering the population we have, it's very little. So some people are saying, we are building a bacterial balance in your body. We are eating a lot of bacteria, and we are touching soils. So my point is, and when we are, it's a theory, when we are protecting ourselves from the natural environment, we get somehow, weak against bacteria. I'm not doctor, I can't say, but that's the situation we have.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Takaharu. Vivian?
Yes, Tigran. Well, we in Cali, we haven't gotten to that stage yet where we've done changes in architecture in terms of what happened to COVID-19. We're still digesting everything that has happened. But what we definitely did realize, and it was a little bit of what I shared with you, is that as much as educational infrastructure is very important, it's not the only thing that you have to have into consideration. Having said that, I have to say that the spaces that we built during the project are being very useful now because they're wider, because they have more lighting, because they have more ventilation. And we are doing this process in which in Colombia, it's called alternancia, or it's this process in which a certain portion of the children do go to school on some days and another portion goes on other days. It's coming in very handy, and it's helping out. But we haven't had time yet to be able to digest, how architecturally we're going to change because of COVID. We're in that process still.
Thank you very much, Vivian.
Tigran?
Yes, sure.
If I have just 30 seconds, I need to tell you one thing.
Please do.
This COVID situation processed ICT education quite a lot. And because of ICT education, we are ready to start new education. And so in that kind of situation, there is no age group limit. All different age group can study in one school and in one classroom. That's the kind of change started happening in Japan. I think it's very interesting.
Great, that's a very good point. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we also don't have time, and I'm very quickly passing over to my dear colleague Fernando Cortes for concluding remarks. and with thanks for his all his job on safer schools in the World Bank.
Okay, thank you, Tigran. Our session has come to the end. Thank you very much to the speakers and colleagues who worked on the organization of this session. We hope that our session inspires in new optimism about the power of school infrastructure and smart and well-designed investments in school infrastructure to address or mitigate many challenges that we face globally. And we hope also that you will consider joining our effort. Thank you very much, and good night, good evening, and good day for everyone.